I had a drug problem. I had a drug problem when I was young. I had a drug problem, and getting busted was the best thing. I mean, it saved my life. I doubt it. If it hadn't happened to me, I don't know that I would have had the strength or the confidence to quit. I don't know.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan. Today's chat is a real treat. Stacy is thoughtful, thought-provoking, kind, insightful, and boy, has he lived a full life. We dive really deep into this chat, but I won't give too much away, but I really love how Stacy turned his life around after his addiction and jail stint, which he saw as a blessing in disguise, which is just awesome to hear. I could talk about this man for ages. I really enjoyed this chat, and he left me questioning many things, all in a really positive light. This man is a genuine powerhouse, and he's achieved so much as you can imagine. And he has probably one of the largest credits in Hollywood, with over 350 to his name. So let's get into it and officially introduce today's guest. Stacy Keach is an actor, teacher, author, producer, writer, and director. He's won pretty much every award to date, such as Best Actor Golden Globe, 3 Obies, 3 Vernon Rice Awards, 2 Drama Desk Awards, 3 Helen Hayes Awards, the Millennium Recognition Award, the Shakespeare Will Award, nominations for an Emmy and Tony Awards, and most recently the International Satellite Mary Pickford Lifetime Achievement Award. In 2015, he was inducted into the American Theatre Hall of Fame, and in 2019, he received a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Stacy is also, as he defines himself, an American interpreter of Shakespeare, with notable performances such as Hamlet, Henry V, Coriolanus, Falstaff, Macbeth, Richard III, and King Lear, to name a few. He's also started Zoom Theatre during COVID, and links which will be in the episode notes below, and that's just really enterprising. And I'm just going to skim through some of his TV and film credits because there's just way too many. So some of his many TV credits include Mike Hammer, Titus, 2.5 Men, Blue Bloods, Prison Break, NCIS, New Orleans, The Blacklist, Man with a Plan, American Greed. And some of his movie credits include Gotti, Truth, Gold, Fat City, Nebraska, If I Stay, Bourne, Supremacy, Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, The Ninth Configuration, Doc, Up in Smoke, American History X, The Long Riders, and The New Centurions. And can you believe we're not done yet? He also has an award-winning memoir, All in All, and the link will be below as well. So as you can imagine, in this chat we cover a lot, such as being camera shy, addictions and cocaine, confidence, his love of acting, his jail stint and the learnings from that, Zoom theatre, imagination, and authenticity. Before we get into this epic chat, if you'd like to keep up to date with the latest info regarding the podcast, follow Funny in Failure on Instagram and Facebook. I often post short clips and other cool stuff to keep you in the loop for upcoming and previous episodes. Also, if you'd like to follow me personally, I'm on Instagram and Twitter under Michael_Kahan. That's Kahan with a K. And lastly, the podcast comes out every week, 5 p.m. Mondays, Australian Eastern Standard Time. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any other terrific episodes. I hope you enjoy. So this could be an interesting place to start. I heard early in your career that you're a bit camera shy and you were introduced to, I think, a camera named Mitch. Was the camera named Mitch? Can you tell me about your experience with Mitch?
I was doing, yes, I can. My first big role in a movie was in a film called End of the Road. And a great photographer, cinematographer, Gordon Willis, was one of his first movies. And he noticed that I was a little bit uncomfortable working in front of a camera because I was a stage actor and really hadn't done that much work in movies. In fact, I'd only done one other film. And he took me aside and he said, I want to introduce you to Mitch. And I said, Mitch? Who was Mitch? He said, Mitchell Camera. It's the Mitchell Camera. And you come over here and say hello to Mitch. I said, well, hello, Mitch. I felt like, well, this is insane talking to a machine like this. But, it actually loosened me up. I became much more comfortable. And then he said, now that you've met Mitch, every day come in and have a word with him and, before the day starts. And over here is Airy. I said, Airy? He said, it's an Aeroflex camera. Come over and say hello to Airy. So I did. I went over and said hello. Some of the crew thought I was out of my mind. I mean, they were looking at, coming in and talking to these machines and the other actors. But it worked. And I've always been indebted to Gordon Willis for giving me that insight into, well, feeling more comfortable in front of a camera, not being so self-conscious. That's what it was all about.
I find that it's really interesting how someone can take you aside, because sometimes we just want to do our job and that's it. But he actually saw something in you and actually wanted to help. That can sometimes be a bit rare. That's very interesting. And
yeah, he was a wonderful, wonderful man. Of course, he then went on to photograph The Godfather.
Ah,
yeah. He was a great cinematographer. Great. He passed away not too long ago.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I'm always been indebted to him for that. And,
we often talk about on this podcast people that kind of tap us on the back and how they change our lives. And it's not necessarily like the director pulls you aside and gives you these words of wisdom. It's just someone that you wouldn't think of that can really change the trajectory of our life in a sense. And it's so nice that, as I said, someone saw something in you and that actually wanted to help. But also, it's also interesting that you're coming from theater and it's a different kind of ball game. And you understand this obviously a lot better than me, in that it's a different type of acting because there's a camera there. And so I'm wondering, mentally, was that a bit, what was the word you used? Like, were you a bit self-conscious? Were you a bit insecure about transitioning?
Self-conscious is the proper phrase. That's exactly what it was. It was self-conscious in a way that disallowed me from concentrating on playing the character. Oh. It was something I was thinking that I was either acting too big or not enough, but mainly too big. I was always afraid that, because coming from the theater where you have to project to the audience, in a movie, the camera comes to you so that you then have to go deeper into yourself in order to express the feelings of the character that you're playing. So it was a different dynamic. Nowadays, I think, because cameras are so much a part of our lives, whether they're iPhone cameras or cameras or whatever.
Definitely.
That self-consciousness has literally evaporated, gone away, in terms of working in front of a camera. I mean, I think we spend most of our lives now, every day I want to grab a photo of that, get a selfie or whatever. It's changed. But speaking of somebody who's tapped you on the back and changed your mind, I remember when I was very early in my career in the theater, and I was playing the bastard in a production of King Lear that a wonderful actor, Lee J. Cobb, who was a very famous American character actor, was playing Lear, and I was playing the bastard, Edmund. And I gave a terrible matinee performance in front of some very dear friends of mine. Ooh. Who came backstage afterwards, and I had a dressing room mate. His name was Michael Granger. He was an older gentleman. He was an actor. He was playing a part in the play. And he was also present when my friends came back and said, Stacy, great job. We loved your performance. And I said, oh, no, I'm sorry. No, I was just terrible this afternoon. And they were sort of dumbfounded and didn't know what quite to say. And they went away. And then Michael Granger turned to me and said, "How ungrateful you are.
Oh.
When somebody compliments you, nobody cares what you're thinking. Just say thank you. Just acknowledge the fact that they admired your performance and say thank you. Don't say, well, I know you don't know what you're talking. It makes somebody feel like they're stupid for having given you a pat on the back. No.
Wow. What do you think that, because you've been in, I was looking at your IMDb credits, for example, and we've had some, well, everyone on the podcast is incredible in their own right, but you've had like over 360 credits plus theater. And so you would be used to compliments. What's kind of been your relationship with compliments now? Because you know that you're going to receive a lot of it and it's earned.
I'm deeply grateful for them. No, absolutely. No. Compliments are always nice. I think we all like to be complimented. And I mean, no.
No, I know what you mean, but I'm just thinking, because that's game-changing advice, as you said. And often what we think is happening is not how someone else is going to see us as well. So
Right.
when you're perhaps saying that you didn't do the best job, they're just seeing you. They haven't seen you practice and do the
Right.
show every single day. They're just seeing.
Exactly.
And so did that kind of, I would imagine, did it make you feel a bit more at ease, or a bit more, did it make you realize that you don't need to perhaps be so serious, perhaps?
It was a great lesson. It was a wonderful lesson to acknowledge how you're treated by the public, and not just your, and these were friends. These weren't just strangers, I mean, the truth of the matter is, I probably would never have said that to a stranger. If somebody had said, "Nice job," I wouldn't have said, if I didn't know the person, I would have said, you don't know what you're talking about. I was terrible.
Yeah.
It,
It's an interesting dynamic. And I was also just going back to what you said about confidence in the camera. After communicating with the camera, did that kind of flick the switch? Did you just gain instant confidence, or was it a bit of a build-up?
it wasn't instant necessarily. It was a process. During the course of that film, the film was called End of the Road. It was one of my first films. And as I got toward the end of the shoot, I was feeling pretty good. And it helped me launch myself into the next movie. And I felt, when I came on the set of the next film, I was much more comfortable. And even though I was still going up to Mitch and saying, "How do you feel today, Mitch? How's it going?" And the producers and the director, again, they looked at me like, "What is he doing?" And I had to explain to them the story that I just told you about Gordon Willis getting rid of my self-consciousness. Anyway.
It's a brilliant story, and it's also a way to get us to get out of our mind and to see it as something like a human, to realize that you can build a connection with something as well. But yes. I'm also thinking on the confidence side, like confidence is the name of the game. I've seen many actors, comedians, improvisers, and I've seen brilliant ones, but the difference between them getting to perhaps the next level, whatever that means for whoever, is confidence. Yeah. And so I've seen people crippled, and I just find it, it's very interesting. I've seen a lot of people not go to the next level because they've lacked that confidence. And so to see what's happened with you, to unleash an aspect of that confidence can, build a career, it can build you in so many different directions, but without confidence it can be very tough.
I think that it's probably the most important ingredient for the actor, because ultimately what we want to do as artists is to express ourselves as fully as possible and unleash our imagination.
Yep.
Because that's where the genius lies, in terms of what you're able to express in terms of the behavioral nuances of a character. And that requires, how you get to a place where your imagination is flourishing I think there's no simple answer to that. I mean, it's like, I also write music and I compose, and a song will come in the middle. I mean, John Lennon used to say it could come in the middle of the night, it can come in the middle of another performance. Where you suddenly get an idea, a spark that you have to allow it to flourish in your inside of you, and then express it as openly as possible. But it's hard to say how that happens initially. It can. I mean, there's a line in Hamlet that has always stuck with me. Well, the readiness is all. And that, I think, is being prepared, as much as possible in terms of knowing your lines, not just knowing your lines, but knowing how to express those lines in many different ways, not just one way, but 5 different ways, or 10, or, how to say I love you. Different ways of saying I love you. I love you, or I love you. I mean, there's all different ways of expressing those words. And again, the imagination is what comes in, I think, which allows you to do it. When I've taught acting, I've told, it's one of the things, one of my assignments for students is to come in with 10 different ways of saying I love you.
I like that, and it changes everything as well. It can also get you out of your head in a sense where you're just focusing on the actual line and to explore.
Exactly. That's right.
This just kind of sprung to mind. I know that when I've done improv, for example, or even stand-up, maybe just stand-up, and I'm not a stand-up by any means. I knew my lines, for example, and I've seen this with everyone, and everyone can resonate. It doesn't need to just be limited to creativity, where you want to play like the character, but when you lack confidence, you might not be able to play the big character or the small character, and we can play it safe. But when we play it safe, we don't get anywhere. And I'm sure in your acting career, you've had those experiences or those moments where you're like, maybe probably earlier on, of how you're going to play this character, because perhaps there's a lot of mind games, or you're worried what someone will think. How have you been able to tackle that aspect and just be true to yourself and the character?
Well, that's a good question. I think it happens in different ways. One of the things that I feel is important for an actor is not to make value judgments on a character if you're playing a bad guy, for example.
Yep.
If you're playing a bad guy, if you start to moralize about the character, you begin to infuse the character. If you try too hard to make him sympathetic, for example, to make him, yes, you have to find, Iago is probably one of the greatest evil characters on, and how to make Iago interesting and compelling without violating the integrity of who he is a challenge. It's a big challenge. But I think that you meet that challenge, again, by exploring many different ways of expressing a moment. Not just doing it one way, doing it as many different ways as you can. I found that technique, for me, in my career, has allowed me to do the things that I've done.
So I'm thinking earlier on when you're a bit newer, and I know your family, you come from a line of actors as well. I would still imagine earlier on when you're coming in, you're still not quite sure how to play it. I know you've got the theater background.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, like, when you're new to something, there's just so much happening, and sometimes we can be hyper aware of everything else. Did you have that awareness going straight in, or has it been like a build up of, I'm here to play the role and I'm here to do the best that I can?
It's more of a build up. It's something, it evolves over time. It changes. Yes, it grows over time. Whenever I've had a challenge in terms of how I'm going to play a character, I think it's important to leave the door open for the director, which you can actually, leave it open, but if you have to shut shut it. I mean, if you realize early on that the director is not helping you, in fact, he's making you more self-conscious and not, then you have to, ignore what the director's saying. Or I have what they call the red herring philosophy, which is when you're working in a movie where there's a director, the director is an important director, and he comes to you and says, Stacy, I want you to do this, just do this with a little bit more intensity, And if you may not agree with the director, but when the camera rolls and they say action, and you say the line, and however you say the line, you give the director credit for having given you the clue to doing something that is nice. Brilliant. In other words, the director is always right, even though and you can totally ignore the director and do it your own way and still give him credit, because there's so much ego involved with artists and particularly with, and I don't mean just that in a bad sense, but that, people who are working together as artists all have their own feelings about themselves and what they're doing. And some more than others. I mean, some directors, for example, their ego gets completely out of control and they start screaming at everybody.
Jeez. Still.
Yeah.
Wow. Because we hear, basically to summarize, we hear that has happened with everyone on this podcast. The vast majority are great, but those people that are like divas or extremely ego-driven, and you're right, ego is healthy to a degree. You don't want to be that monster. I would also, because you're there to perform a job, but then if you've got all of this, I don't know if it's like politics or negativity, that can also take away from the performance. It can take away from the vibe. Have you been able to kind of center yourself over the years? Because I know it wouldn't have, that is tough. That's tough in all areas of every career.
Right. Well, it varies. The most important thing is, for me, is to be involved, engaged with whatever, the character, or even just getting a job. Sometimes you have to deal with your agent in a way that you have to be diplomatic, and instead of screaming and yelling, I haven't worked in 6 months. Why do we, I'm leaving. I mean, these are not gestures that help one's career. And also, I've noticed over the years in working with many different wonderful actors and also some not so wonderful actors, that the not so wonderful ones are, generally speaking, the diva quality that you were speaking of comes out, and it prevents the actor from really expressing him or herself in truthful and meaningful ways.
It's very interesting. I also imagine what you were saying before, like with the agents. Actually, I'm taking a bit of a sidestep. I come from a accounting background, so you have that stable job, and then you're talking about the. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm looking to get into screenwriting, and I do this, and you know that you have that safety or that paycheck. But then as an actor, sometimes you, as you would know, and I'm surprised that you've been able to work for so long, because we hear of moments of absolute no work. But it's also very hard because at the same time, this is a business, and you've also want to be creative and explore the character and probably 100 other things. Have you been able to not lose your shit when there's moments of no work, and be creative and keep the passion and the fire alive?
The way I do it personally is, well, if I'm doing a play, I yearn sometimes, to get off the stage and do a movie. and if it's not available, if it's not happening, then I spend another hour or two at the piano, at the keyboard, working, expressing myself that way.
Nice.
Reading is important, I think. And, I think whenever you can use your observational powers, which is what an actor uses in terms of how he's going to do something, I think in the beginning of, whether you're observing a behavioral pattern or way a person walks, the way a person talks, or the essence of that person, research then becomes a kind of interesting thing. For me, whenever I'm playing a historical character, somebody who's actually lived, I get very excited about it because it allows me to go back and research not only the person, but their heritage, but also the time in which they're living.
Oh, interesting.
I've been Zooming a lot of plays during the pandemic.
I've heard Zoom theater, right?
Yeah, and we just finished, in fact, we're doing a revival of a play that we just did about Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. A wonderful actor, Harris Yulin, who I've worked with many times, plays Freud and I play Jung. And it was a thrill to be able to go back and really to engage with those people and the lives that they led, the things that they wrote, the things that they said. This is all, this to me it's not work. It's a joy.
That's so good.
Yeah. So I try to use my downtime in a way that I know, for example, I'm getting ready to do some future Zooms, one about Alfred Stieglitz and George O'Keeffe, a play that I did years ago with the late Margot Kidder, God bless her. And we're going to Zoom it. And another Zoom play that I'm working on is about Archibald MacLeish and Mark Van Doren. So these are people who actually lived. So that's always, that's a wonderful joy for me to research their lives and the period that they came from and their families, etc. Playing a fictitious character is a whole other thing altogether. And that's very liberating in terms of the imagination, because then you can do whatever the hell you want, basically. You don't have to worry about being true to who they were.
I've written down 1,000 questions, and I want to discuss Zoom theater in a sec. Just one of the points that kind of sprung to mind is it sounds like you've got so many tools to get out of your head as well. And if you're not perhaps feeling it in theater, you move to movies, or you can go back into composing and music, or you can just go and live your life. And a lot of advice that we've received on this podcast is about having a hobby and not just having absolute solo vision in perhaps just acting and making that your entire life. And as you've alluded to as well, by doing other things, you can be a better actor and probably a more whole person as well. Was that a conscious decision when you were first coming in?
I think so. Yeah. It's always been, you see, when I was growing up, even though I came from a theatrical family, my parents did not want me to be an actor.
That's so crazy.
They did not, no. And then they want my brother to go into this business. My dad was he said, it's a terrible business. It's a terrible business. It's full of disappointment and heartache, and you don't want that. You want to go be a doctor or a lawyer. Do something that's stable. He changed his mind in later years after we both achieved some modicum of success. But initially, it was very, so when I decided I wanted to be an actor, I pursued it with fury. I worked as hard as I possibly could. In terms of the roles that I was playing. I think the thing that really opened my mind to being an actor was acting in a high school play, Our Town, playing the stage manager, a part that my dad had played when he was a young man. So he came around, he got very excited the fact that he was going to be able to teach me and tell me how to play a certain moment. And you're describing the butternut tree. I remember he put his hands up and he became the tree. He became the branches of the tree. And it was, and this was the first time that I really connected with my father on an artistic level.
Oh,
because he was so excited about the fact that I was, going to play this part, even though he didn't want me to be an actor. Anyway,
I think that's beautiful in a sense. We've heard that as well, where I can comfortably say that the vast majority of people in this podcast, we've had over 150 guests. The vast majority, their parents don't want the child to be a part of it. But at some level, and I've heard you talk about this as well, that he was like secretly proud of you, and he was seeing what you were doing and knew that you were actually good. But there's still, as I'm not a parent, but better than me, that you want the safety net, knowing that your child will be safe, and that's what it seems to be about.
Right. And when I began to understand kind of what the business was about, and I realized that nobody works all the time. Well, there are some people.
Very few.
Very few. Most of the time, actors they have a run, and then there's a gap, and then there's a run and a gap. Range it pours, both in work and out of work. So I thought to myself, well, I have to do something in order to make a living. If I'm not, So I started really cultivating my voiceover talents, and began to really seriously audition to do voiceover work, and that really helped support me financially over the when I was out of work. Because when I'm doing theater, the other thing is, if you're doing theater, and particularly if you're doing Shakespeare, you're not making a lot of money.
Yeah.
You're doing, it pays the soul, but doesn't pay the rent.
Yeah, that's the balance, as you said, the business and the creativity and the passion. And I know, like, for example, TV pays well, but you're also locked in potentially for a long time, and this is the character that you want to be. And at the same time, you've got a family, and there's people can just see, well, I when I say people, I mean me. Before all of this, I thought, you just get a TV show and it's fine. You earn a lot of money and that's it. But you don't know what you're signing up for. You don't know who's involved. You don't know if you're going to be, how involved you're going to be. You don't know if the show's going to go and you don't know if you're going to be able to express yourself in the way that you want to as well. And it's just so interesting, the business side as well. And what's also interesting is we've had some people in this podcast who are the star of their show, who have been in amazing things, and then no work, a year, 2 years, no work. And I'm just wondering what that would do for one's confidence as well. I know that you can do a lot of things and you've got into voiceover, but you would have had to figure that out a bit later on in your career.
That's right. Exactly.
How did you decide that? Like, what were you thinking? Because it could be very scary and daunting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When I was a young actor, I had a great success. I thought, my objective as a young actor was I wanted to be like a Laurence Olivier. He was my idol. He was my god. And he was a great Shakespearean actor. He was also a great movie actor. He was my inspiration. And I had the great privilege of meeting him. But anyway,
nice.
I thought Hamlet as a young actor I had to play Hamlet. And I did play Hamlet. I played him 3 times, as a matter of fact, 3 different productions. And I'll never forget my agent, Sue Mingers at the time, coming to me. I had tremendous success in New York, in Central Park, playing Hamlet. And I thought, this is it. I've made it, and now my career is going to just take off. Well, the phone didn't ring. I mean, nothing happened. I couldn't believe it. I thought, when I got these great reviews, and I thought, wow, what's going on? And my agent said, Stacy, nobody's casting King Lear this week. Come out to Hollywood, get your nose dirty like everybody else, and get out of your ivory tower with Shakespeare. Oh boy. It was an eye opener. But I mean, I realized that part of the world still exists. I mean, it's still there. I mean, there's still a certain antipathy with certain people. If you're a stage actor, that means you're not worthy of, you're not going to be good in front of a camera. There's still, that sensibility still exists with a lot of people. It's totally false, but I mean,
Yeah.
Because I think the best actors do come from the theater.
I tend to agree from what I've seen as well.
Yeah.
It gives you this grounding that it doesn't seem to occur with most people. Obviously, there's exceptions, but it's the grounding aspect. And I've always seen, regardless if one's an actor or they're an accountant or whatever, you need a strong foundation. And it seems that good theater programs have really helped an actor in that regard.
Right. For me, my objective has always been versatility, to be able to play comedy as well as tragedy, as well as, I mean, to be able to do it all, do as much in that area, which is different than, there are certain people who are movie stars, who are just, they have a charisma, and they're stars. They're not necessarily actors, even though they can express themselves as a character, but the character that they express is always themselves or an extension of themselves. I mean, I don't think I don't know that John Wayne could have ever played King Lear, but there are, even though I think he surprised a lot of people in his later career. He wasn't always just John Wayne. He suddenly started to play, characters. I had the great privilege of working with Paul Newman in a movie called Judge Roy Bean. And Paul Newman was playing, it was his first, I was playing a small part. And he came up to me and he said that he was very nervous about playing this character. And I said, why, Paul? He said, well, I've always been a leading man, and that's my image. And he was very aware of who he was. He said, I don't know that people are going to accept me as a character. I thought that was very interesting. Of course, we did accept him as a character. He went on to play other characters in his later career. But he was nervous about challenging the public or his idea of what the public perception of him as a handsome leading man.
It can be a bit of a minefield and I completely understand, but it can be a bit of a minefield when you're so worried about how others will perceive you. And one of the many things I find very interesting with you, and I've heard a few quotes and all of that stuff, is that, as you said, you picked versatility and you like to play different characters. Whereas in Hollywood, if you can play like the same character and be known for a type of role, you can earn serious amounts of money and you be known in that one area. Whereas if you play a whole different range of roles, from what I've seen, that can actually cost you financially.
Yes, that's
which is so bizarre.
It is. It's a total paradox.
Yeah,
really.
You're being the best that you can be, and you're trying to be as creative as possible.
Right.
Or honor yourself in a sense and honor your craft. Right. And then you kind of, well, if you want to look at success as financial figures, which I don't think you do, then it's, yeah. So what's your mindset around that?
In terms of measuring success?
That as well. Yeah, we'll go there.
Yeah, no, I think success is, for me, it's not just good reviews. or the way people perceive you. It's how you feel about yourself. And if you feel that you've done a good job, that's the most important thing. I mean, I know I've come out of auditions thinking, well, I nailed that sucker. I really got it. I'm going to get this part. I know I am. And then it doesn't come your way. And you thought, well, maybe I was wrong. But then where else can you go? If you don't, again, it comes back to this whole aspect of confidence. And confidence is generated, I think, when you feel good about yourself.
Yep. I would imagine that you've had to change your relationship with confidence, because sometimes we can get our confidence externally, and through my perspective, that's not a long-term game plan, or we can get it internally through things that we do. But typically, we all start, not we all, but a lot of people start with the external and then realize that that's not going to keep us going for the long term.
Right. It doesn't. No, exactly. Well said. Well said.
So I've got a question for you. So if you do a really bad movie and it hasn't done that well through the public, but you feel like you just did a great job, you're in creative flow, you felt that you collaborated well, is that a success to you?
Yeah, it is.
Nice.
I don't, yeah. And believe, I mean, it's happened where I have felt that way, and the movie came out and it got bombed, and what can you do? You just have to, move on.
I think you hit the nail on the head, because an actor is a cog in the machine. There's so many people involved, and all you can really do is your best. You can't really worry about the marketing, for example, which is crucial. And I heard this story from, I can't remember his name, but he plays Dwight on The Office, or played Dwight on The Office. And he was saying how he cared so much early on of how everything was perceived. And that wasn't healthy for him in more areas than just acting. And he realized that one of the examples is he was in a movie and it didn't do well, and that crushed him. But then later on, with experience and I guess surrounding himself with great people, he realized that, as you said, all he can do is really control what he can do. And as long as he feels good and he's showing up and he's doing the best job that he can, then that's the success. But it's still quite hard to get there. So I'm wondering, has there been a push and a pull? Were you the type of person earlier on where you really worried about that stuff? Or did you realize that if you want?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, particularly as a young actor, you're constantly, very aware of perception and image. Image is another thing that has always gotten in my way in certain areas.
How so?
My dear dad, God bless him, was bald, completely bald. He'd lost his hair when he was a young man, and he always blamed the fact that he didn't have a good hairpiece. That caused him not to get the kind of roles that he thought he was entitled to play. And as a result of that, as a young actor, I was constantly being told, once my parents had accepted the fact that I was going to be an actor, and my brother as well, hair pieces became very important. Wearing a toupee, making sure that you have hair, making sure that image projected as a young man, is very important. Wear your hairpiece. I'll never forget. It was like, that was a constant cry coming from my parents. And I got to a certain age, I think it was in my early 30s, where I said, forget it, this is ridiculous. I'll wear it for a character, but I'm not going to, but I don't want Stacy Keach to look like some, with a terrible hairpiece. Even though I have many pictures of me as a young actor where I see this terrible hairpiece. And there's a wonderful word in Polish for hairpiece called czapka, your czapka. And my wife, my dear wife, Małgosia, who's Polish, said, you must get rid of the chapter. You know, yeah. She was one of the people who inspired me to be myself. You know, you can always wear, you know, a wig when you're playing a character, and I've won, God knows, many of those. But I was very self-conscious about that because I was given to believe that unless you have a certain image, that you're not going to be successful.
It's so interesting, and it keeps on being reiterated to me, and it's a lot easier said than done. Is we feel we need to be someone, and I know Hollywood. Well, you correct me. I know Hollywood has their angles, and we feel we need to be someone that perhaps we're not. But just as a general rule of thumb in every area, whether it's business, as I said, or other careers, when you are true to yourself, that's where you kind of let your light shine. And I know as an actor, you're probably going up against similar actors for certain roles, and not all roles are right for you. But you're not going to get the role if you're going to play, who springs to mind, like Michael Douglas, for example. You're going to get the role because you're playing you. And by that includes your facial features, everything. And just one thing that springs to mind, I had Joel McKinnon Miller on the podcast, and he said he wasn't getting any work, and he was conscious about his haircut, and he shaved his hair to like a buzz cut like the army. And he said he's never stopped working since because he embraced an aspect of himself.
Right. Yes. Well, you enter the fray of the current trend. You know, the baldness of, you know, now the shaved head has become a very acceptable, popular way, not just for bad guys. It used to be only for bad guys, but now, those things happen. Yeah. I mean, with women, I think it's particularly interesting in terms of hair do's and, you know, look. I think women are, and I think rightfully so, are much more concerned about image than men.
Yep. There's a lot more there, unfortunately, as well. But I'm just thinking that moment where you decide to not have the hair pieces or whatever and embrace you, was there a bit of a push and a pull? Because you're talking about how you've...
You're not kidding. My father threatened to take me out of his will. I mean, no, I'm teasing.
I just know how to respond to that.
Yeah, it wasn't quite that severe, but nevertheless, there was that pull, you know, and even and not just my dad and my mom, it was also agents, you know. They're saying, well, you're going to go up for that part. Maybe you should think about putting a little, you know. I have wonderful hair wig maker. His name was Ziggy Geig. And I just about every movie I was ever in, I wore I wore a lot of hair pieces, different, but that was for the character. It was fine.
Yeah.
But but there was still like for example, I mean, even today, I told my wife that I was doing this interview with you, the Zoom interview. She said, "Are you going to wear makeup?" I said, no, I'm not going to wear makeup. It's all right. You know, but I mean, it's part of the whole. If you're exposing yourself to the public, you might as well, you know, you want to look as good as you possibly can, but you also want to be yourself. You know, you want to be who you are. Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking, because you know, I've heard, you know, we've talked about perception, all of that. Now, do you find it a lot more comfortable to just say, no, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing? Not in a rude way, but just, you know, I'm being authentic to me.
That moment doesn't occur anymore. I mean, people.
Oh, nice.
Well, you know, I've been doing this a long time, so.
It's the key. One of the keys to your success is, I would imagine, being true to yourself, because how would you be able to do it for so long?
Exactly. That's the reason. Being true to yourself, that is the key. I know I hate to, it sounds so kind of proselytory. I don't like, you know, to be preachy.
No, I don't think it is.
No,
I,
but
I,
it is the essence of what we're talking about.
as we said, you can only really control what you can control. And look, I understand
Right.
perception's important, and I know there's so many other variables. But at the end of the day, when you're focusing on so much that just you can't do, so you can't do anything about it, it just holds you back. I'm not saying like let go and do whatever you want, but it takes off another layer of stress. And there's already a lot of stress in life and in your field as well, but it just gives you breathing room. And I would also imagine it would unleash an aspect of confidence as well, because as we said, you're being true to yourself, you're being authentic.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you. So I've written down, I think, 20 questions just based on what we've been saying now, just quickly jotting them down. We could go two ways, so we'll see where it goes. We're talking about success and what your definition is of success. But earlier on, you were talking about how your dad, let's just say, wasn't a fan of you wanting to be an actor. But then you mentioned, I forgot what the phrase was, but once he saw that you had some success, things kind of opened up. That would have been also a very interesting moment for you when you realized that your father's kind of given his approval as well, because we all want the approval of our father as well. Do you remember
Yes,
that time?
I do remember it very well. Yeah. And even though I coming out of high school, I had done some plays and I had done Our Town, which it was the first time that he really engaged with me on an artistic level. But when I went to school at Berkeley, my dad said, you can't do a play until you get good grades your freshman year. You have to get good grades. You have to be able to get good grades. If you get good grades, then you can do a play. Well, I got decent grades. They weren't great, but they were okay. Got me, And it allowed me to do my first play in college at the end of my freshman year. And it was called To Learn to Love, written by a man named William Oliver, who became my teacher and my mentor and a great source of inspiration for me as a young actor. And I was good in this play, and my parents came to see me, and Professor Oliver said, your son has got talent, and they acknowledged the fact that, okay, this is who he is, and this is what he's going to do.
Oh, no.
And they finally came around, and from that point on, they supported me.
Because I've seen, and there's also been not a struggle, but I've seen the hardships endured. And as we said, the parents want the best for us. But it can also be very hard because we feel we've got so much to prove and we want to make our parents proud as well. And sometimes, like I know with me, I've had absolute tunnel vision, which has actually taken me away from the craft. And it's this like fine little balance. But I would imagine the weight of having that would just have made it so much easier. But was it holding you back at the time?
Yes, it was. It was definitely, but it quickly went away. And then I really became serious, and I applied to Tufts Arena Theater summer stock, and spent my summer acting. And my subsequent summers during the college of my career, I went up to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival and did, even though my parents, even though they finally acknowledged that I was going to become an actor, my dad was said, "You're not going to do Shakespeare, are you? Come on, you got to make you're not going to make a living doing Shakespeare." And he was an actor, and he had also done Shakespeare in his career. But
Oh, really? It just sounds like he was looking out for you. I think I remember him actually in Get Smart.
It was all love based. There was no question about it. It was coming out of love, not antipathy of any kind.
I've got many more questions, so we'll park them. Something you just said before was in terms of dealing with rejection. And I heard you on another podcast, I believe, and an actor or people in the creative arts get rejected more than anybody. You maybe not now, but most people get rejected like at least 1,000 times to every yes. Or I don't know what the number is. And that's tough. And I know that earlier on that you used to be very angry, and I completely understand. How did you kind of process the rejection better? And I'd like to know how you handle the rejections now.
I decided that I didn't like these feelings of, that I was having, that anger, as you say, So I thought that the solution to fixing this problem would be to really come to understand it, really observe it, and articulate what it is, and let your perspective be open to what is the reality is. The reality is this: that when you don't get the part, rather than taking it personally, look at it this way. There are three great actors, let's say Albert Finney, Anthony Hopkins, and Peter O'Toole, and they're all right for this part, but only one of them can get the part. And the question is, so it's and the reason whoever gets the part gets it for a number of different reasons that have nothing to do necessarily with what the actor can control. It has to do with chemistry with the other actor, how that actor fits in to the fabric of the whole piece. And it's nothing you can control. You can only, as you say, do your best. Like, I was teaching a course, an acting course at George Mason University, and one of my objectives was to give young actors a certain amount of confidence in terms of how to deal with auditions, which is, our auditions are barbaric. They are, but we have to accept that fact. But the adjustment that I had to make was when you go in for an audition, you're going in to audition them.
Oh, that's a nice take.
You are going, whether or not you want, it's not, you've done your work, you've prepared, and so that's a given. When you go in, of course, you got to be prepared. You got to be prepared. That's number one. But when you go in, and you are literally, you're testing them to see whether or not you want to work for them, and it liberates a certain anxiety or tension. It gets rid of certain stress.
I think that's really important. And I just know, like, from applying for commerce related jobs, and my friends are now in commerce as well, and when they're going through job interviews, you can see the stress. But at the end of the day, you're not going to necessarily take the first yes. There's so many different auditions that you can go for, and you need to, it's your life. It's something that you're going to be doing for whether it's a short time or a long time. Right. And so just saying, look, obviously we need to say yes at certain stages, but as you said, especially in the commerce arena, you don't need to just take the yes because it's there. Like, there's so much more to it, and just because someone's offered you something doesn't mean that you actually have more power than you think, and that you can actually decide whether the role's right for you.
Exactly.
And we're not really taught that. We're taught that the other person has the power. I'm not saying using power as a negative word, so we can regain our power to realize that it's not a one-sided streak. And then that liberates us, as you said.
Right.
Just on what you were saying before, and I've heard stories where an actor's eye color is wrong, or they're a little bit too small and they don't get the job because of that. And that can be really frustrating. Do things like that bother you anymore? You're like, that's my eye color. I'm a little bit small, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Nobody likes to be rejected. I mean, so no matter what the reason for the rejection, but you begin with time and experience, and you gain a perspective that you realize that this is just the way life is, and you accept it, and it doesn't cripple you. It allows you, the understanding of it allows you to go forward without stress.
I really like that perspective. And, we've been talking about confidence and being true to yourself. And I think this will also do justice to your story, in that many years ago you were arrested, and we'll get into it, We'll see how far we can go with time. And you labeled that moment as the best thing that ever happened to you. Can you kind of, yeah, can you, and
No, I had a drug problem. I had a drug problem when I was a young man. I had a drug problem. And getting busted was the best thing. I mean, it saved my life.
That's so nice.
I doubt it. If it hadn't happened to me, I don't know that I would have had the strength or the confidence to quit. I don't know, but it did. I had a problem, and I was burying my head in the sand. I wasn't acknowledging it. I wasn't aware of it. I mean, I was aware of it, but I wasn't doing anything about it.
Yep.
And, it was a rude awakening, but it saved my life. It really did.
I find this really empowering because something like that can obviously hurt one's health. It can hurt their career, and it can hurt our relationships. But you've spoken about
all of those things. It did all of those things. Yeah.
So how you're going through an experience which, and you're in the public eye as well. You obviously need to work on areas of yourself, and you come out of this experience, and it sounds like it changed you in such a positive way. And I know that you based the warden character in Prison Break based on the warden that you dealt with, and I know people that have worked in the prison system, and it's not necessarily about rehabilitating someone. It can actually push you completely in the other direction. But to hear how you kind of come out of this and to have like somewhat fond memories and how you built yourself up, I also find remarkable, because you had two options. You could have gone one way, but you decided to kind of, not to put words in your mouth, but you went the other way.
Well, I had a lot of support, a lot of emotional support from not only my family, but many friends and fans, because I was very popular at the time, a very popular television show, Mike Hammer. And those things, and also within the system, in the prison system, aside from the warden, there were other guards, screws we called them, that were very sympathetic. There were also guys, they were unsympathetic.
I'm sure.
Wanted nothing more. They couldn't stand the fact that this hotshot celebrity was, in my prison, and they treated me very badly.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, but thank God for for Warden Hayday. He was an amazing force, and he had lost a son to drugs when he was in his 20s, and so he was very sympathetic with my situation. And he didn't think that I should have been there to begin with. He thought I should have been in a rehab center. I mean, I shouldn't have been in prison. But in those days, it was a different set of values. And that experience did change my life. And there's no question about it. It was the lowest point of my career. There was no question about that. I was so ashamed of my stupidity, and it took me those 6 months that I spent there to come to realize that I could change. I can go a different way. And my wife, Malgosia, who was not my wife at the time, was mainly responsible for so much of what I considered to be my move in a positive direction. Her love and support were so essential to me. But the warden was also a very important partner, and he gave me, he understood something he said, he gave me a task, he gave me a job, he said, you're an intelligent guy, you've got a lot of young offenders here that can't read or write. So I want you to take the letters that people read their letters to them, and if they want to write back to their families, write.
That's awesome.
So I was busy. I was busy helping other people, young kids, and that helped save me during the 6 months that I was there.
As cliche as it sounds, love is the answer. It helps us rise from the darkness, and literally in that sense. I've never had an experience like that, and I can only begin to imagine just being in an environment like that. And you alluded to how you were perceived as a hotshot. You're already going through all of these emotions like shame, embarrassment, plus probably 100. And plus you're probably having to deal with an addiction, which is having an adverse reaction to your body, but still to want to grow, to want to move forward. As I said before, you could have easily have gone the other way and decided to not live the life you're living. Like, why? Why did you decide to grow and learn?
I think my survival instinct. I knew that I couldn't survive going the other way. There's no way I would have been. I did. I had an awareness of that. I mean, I wasn't that helpless. I wasn't so much at the mercy of. I mean, I can only imagine what heroin addicts go through. I never went near heroin, and I'm glad I didn't, because I probably would have liked it, and I probably would have gotten stuck on it. Cocaine was I was, when I first was introduced to that drug, I became very interested in what Sigmund Freud had to say about it. He justified in the beginning. He thought it was a miracle drug. He later discovered that it was not, and that it destroyed people's lives. And we bring this up in our little two-hander with Freud and Jung about that situation. But I spent a lot of time deluding myself into the fact that what I was doing was okay, and I was under control. Because that's what happens when you get in. Certainly, everything became very regimented in terms of the amount that I was doing, and I took it from like a scientific point of view.
How interesting.
Just to justify my habit. It was all about that. It was a habit that I was unwilling to break, or unable to even come to terms with. And that's when getting busted will do it to you.
It's also interesting, sorry for cutting you off, because Hollywood at the time, like, you were seen to be cool. Everyone was doing cocaine, and if you weren't, and that's really hard as well, because we've talked about perception, there's networking aspects, but at the end of the day, that's not going to help you, definitely in short and long term. Did you just, being in prison for that long, did your addictions go away? Did you have to look at why they were there, what was happening, or?
All of that, and they did go away. Yeah,
Nice.
It went away. When I came out, I didn't go near it again. No. But it was a heavy price to pay. I
would imagine.
But not as heavy as ending up in the grave. And a lot of my friends ended up there who did not get off the habit.
Yeah.
They're no longer with us.
We've been talking about confidence a lot. One, you're going through, as we said, like the shame and embarrassment and all of these negative emotions. Coming out of prison is one thing, and now you're back into society and you're an actor. What did that do for your confidence as an actor? And because I'm sure you would have thought your career would be impacted, but also you, and where were you at confidence-wise with life?
When I came out of Reading, I was very uncertain about my professional career and where it was going to go. Thanks to Jay Bernstein, who is no longer with us, but he was a producer and a publicist. He was the producer of my camera, and he managed to get me back as Mike Hammer on the air.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I went back to Mike Hammer for one season, but they changed the time slot, and they wanted him to become more like Robert Young and Father Knows Best. They violated the integrity of the original character because there was a new head of Columbia Studios who didn't like the fact that the Hammerettes, the women with the beautiful women with great cleavage, they thought it was very sexist and misogynistic. So they changed all that, and they tried to water him down to make him a goody two shoes. That didn't work for Mike Hammer. We did 13 shows and was off the air.
Oh, wow.
But then some theater possibilities came my way, and one of them was a film called a play called Idiot's Delight, and it was being done at the Kennedy Center in Washington. And I was asked to do that, and the character Harry Van had a cocaine problem.
Ooh.
So it was a moment of synchronicity that I was playing a character just out of jail that had the problem that I had. So it was a very synchronistic moment. Yeah.
That's so interesting. But also coming out of, anything, like, I'm not trying to compare lockdowns whatsoever, but when you've been inside or in a different environment for a while and then going out into a different world, that can be quite anxious, or what's the right word? Anxiety. Yeah.
I've said this in the past, given the space that we've all been in these last 2 years or a year and a half, or these, being isolated and being in one environment, I think that I've been able to deal with it in the way I've been able to deal with it. I mean, I think that I had done some research. I'd rehearsed for this back in my prison days.
I'm glad that you could use it for good.
Some good came from it, yeah.
But still, like, coming out of there's a lot happening, and life would have been slowed down in one area, and then you've gone back into the world.
Right.
I know that you had all of these different roles, but were you like a bit shaken up? Like, I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes. Did you come out firing?
I wasn't. No, I was very happy to be out and be working. I mean, but I mean, there were certain things that did come around that I realized. I mean, for example, there was the possibility of a big commercial for a major product. I'm not sure what, I can't remember what it was. I think it was Gillette. But I remember it got up to the possibility by doing, it was an on-air commercial, reached the highest level of decision-making on their part, and they said, no. His record is not going to allow us to, we can't hire him. So there were those moments, but they were rare. They were, that was when, in fact, I think it was the only time that I really lost a job because of what had.
It's also nice to know that you can go through a experience like that where you're feeling quite low and come out the other end and thrive in not just your career, but also family and environment. You had a support system. It's nice to know that you're not just a mistake. The mistake can fuel you. We all make mistakes, some larger than others, obviously, but you're not defined by that. You can grow and expand.
Right.
And no, go on.
No, I was going to say that well said, and that's kind of what happened with me. Very much so.
So we're going to wrap up the podcast with a rapid fire segment. Actually, before we do that, you've been in this industry for so long. What motivates you? What keeps you going?
Work. The need to express myself artistically. Yeah. That's it.
Well, that's very nice. That's awesome to hear. And I'm sure it would expand you. I've always found doing creativity expands me in so many different ways that I never even thought possible. And, You do such a
Right.
wide range of things. And I didn't even know you did the composing and the teaching until I learned about you, but you've also done writing and producing and directing, and I'm probably missing out on a few things as well, but that all helps you grow and
Yes.
expand as a human as well.
Right.
So what we're going to do to wrap up the podcast is do a rapid fire segment. So the first thing that springs to mind, but you can take your time to think about it. What are you most proud of?
Family.
Next big dream or goal?
Sorry?
Next big dream or goal?
Oh, next big dream or goal. Get home safely. Get back to California safely.
Very nice. If you could gain any skill in the world, what would it be and why?
If I could have
gain any skill in life, what would you want?
Be able to orchestrate music.
Can't you do that already? You're a composer.
I am, but I can't. I have to do it. I can't write it. I don't write music. I record what I've written, and then I can say, okay, this is where the strings are. This is where the horns are. This is where, that's the way I do it. I would love to be able to write music.
Very interesting.
And no, it's not necessary in this day and age. I just wish that it was something that I, had learned earlier in my life. And also to speak Polish.
You've been living there for how long? 20 plus?
My wife constantly criticizes me for saying, I understand a lot of Polish, but I've tried to speak it. I have tried, but it's a very difficult language. And I speak a smattering of other languages, but nothing in the Slavic area. I wish I could, I wish I could miraculously.
Say that again, sorry?
I wish I could miraculously just be fluent in Polish.
So how do you get by? Because you've been living there for a long time now.
Oh, I know enough to get by. I mean, I am the equivalent of maybe a 2 or a 3-year-old, but I can, I can go to the store, I can go to the gas station, I can do whatever I can, and I understand a lot of Polish. I understand a lot more than, I understand more than I don't like to tell my wife how much I understand, because when the kids want something, they speak Polish behind my back, and they,
so they're geniuses. What's one of the key insights you got from living in Poland as opposed to America? What has it done for your soul?
Oh, it's a good question. Polish culture is very refined. It's very elegant. It's much more refined than, in America, we are a diverse nation that has many different, behavioral patterns of expression, whether you're from the south, the north, the west. In Poland, there's it's very, very, Poles are very music conscious, Chopin, of course.
Oh, nice.
Very artistic. I'm getting a little, I like Polish food, but I miss some good old American hamburgers and pizzas.
Yeah, I can imagine. Last few, biggest hurdle or regret? And I think we've spoken about this, but we'll see.
Well, I don't feel any right at the moment. It's just living day by day. But when I was a young guy, it's growing up. I was teased a lot because I had a cleft lip, and that was something I had to overcome. And I also I cracked my hands a little bit.
Oh, really?
So So I had to overcome those things as a young guy with the help again of my wonderful parents. They really supported me in that respect, and my grandparents as well. God bless them.
I also heard we won't have justice to go into we won't be able to do justice to the story, that it actually forced you to be better in so many areas at school, to thrive, and it pushed you in a direction to show that you are a human as well, and that you're not limited by a facial feature.
Right.
Which I think is really cool, because you decided to go one way and show, I'm a human, and I think we can all do that. We've all got that power. We're going to have to do a part 2 because there's just so much to say. Zoom theater, I think it's a genius idea. You've obviously done it because of COVID and lockdowns. What have you learned from acting and also dealing with the lags, the mutes, all of that, and just constructing something like Zoom theater would be pretty tough as well?
It's hard. It really is. I had no idea when I started it how difficult it would be, to be able to zoom your script with your right hand while you're scrolling. It's scrolling on one hand, you're scrolling the script, and keeping your eye on the little green dot at the top, so that you're talking directly, is very tricky. And what I've come to learn is that the way you can do this with greater efficiency and success is rehearsing a lot. Like theater, you can't wing it. You've got to really rehearse it. A lot of rehearsal, a lot more. The first 3 Zooms we did live. Ooh. And they were fraught with problems.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So even though there was an excitement and energy that existed in those live Zooms, it didn't, translate necessarily to the future. But editing is key, I think, to enhancing the quality of the experience. And now, it's a wonderful hybrid. The Zoom, it's a combination of theater, television, and movies, and it has all of those aspects. I'm constantly learning about it, and Zoom itself is getting better in terms of what they're capable of giving you technically, in terms of graphics and movement of, So it's very exciting.
Are you still doing it?
Yeah, I'm just getting ready to. In fact, this week we're reviving, by popular demand, Vienna, which is about Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. And you can catch that at www.stacykeachzoomtheater.com. It's available there. It starts next week.
This podcast probably won't be out in that week, but we'll still upload the website so people can check out future ones.
Okay.
Last 2 questions. Oh, there's so many. Okay. If you could go back into a time when you were first starting out, what advice would you give yourself and why?
That's a tough question to answer. I don't know what advice I would give myself. I think the advice that I give myself constantly, even today, is, take a breath and be more patient. I have a tendency to be very impatient. If things aren't exactly the way I want them, I get very upset, and I have to constantly remind myself that you're going to be a much happier, less stressful person if you just take a breath, take it easy, and yeah.
Very true, and I need that especially.
We all do.
We definitely. I'm a massive Get Smart fan, and I know your dad was in the show. Did he ever have a favorite story that he would tell you about the show?
About
Get Smart.
Oh yeah, yeah. He loved Get Smart. He loved doing it. Yeah. I don't remember any specific story. It's just that he was always very happy when they asked him to come back and play that character.
That's so cool.
He was, yeah. He loved comedy, and he extended that energy and that inspiration to me as well.
That's beautiful to hear. So the last question before we go, I'll ask how people can keep up to date with you and all of that stuff in a sec. But what is the one question I should have asked you?
I don't go for shoulda, woulda, couldas. I don't. No. I don't presume on it. I don't know. You could ask any question you want, Michael.
I've asked plenty, and we'll hopefully do a part 2 sometime because I just keep on writing more points. But I could speak to you for ages. Before we go, how can people keep up to date with you and follow you and see all the amazing things that you're doing?
Well, thank you. My website is gostacykeach.com, and that one place you can find out what I'm doing, and the other place is the Zoom Theater.
And where can people buy your book?
Oh, Amazon.
Amazon. Okay, I'll find a link and I'll put that there. If I can find one, I'll put it there as well.
Okay.
You are amazing. I've learned so much. Also, you've raised so many great points that is going to force me.
Great question, Michael. You wonderful. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure sharing the time with you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And yeah, you're a legend, and we'll chat soon.
God bless.
Confidence is something that many of us have a challenge with at times, and it's just too superficial to just say, go and get confidence. But one thing for sure is that by getting our confidence purely on the externals, for example, how others perceive us, doesn't really build or improve our confidence in the long term. Stacy encourages us to work at this by making a conscious effort to focus on building confidence skills daily, slowly but surely, to see it for the journey that it is. He believes that we need to do something regularly, no matter how big or small it may appear to be, but by doing so allows us to move in a positive, forward direction. I also like his take on how once we unlock our confidence, everything in life becomes easier. So I'll leave you with this amazing quote by Anonymous. Confidence is something you create within yourself by believing in who you are. If you like this episode, share it around, tell your mates. It really helps grow the podcast and spread the positivity and love. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.